This is a recorded presentation of the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock, broadcasting full stereo sound on the Meat and Potato 2012 Conservative Media Network and produced by Ambush Media Films and Sound.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. I am your host, Christopher Mayer, and the 2014 candidate interviews continues on here at the Meat and Potatoes Network. And we're heading into August because we've got an August 30th event coming up. It's called the Candidate Symposium, and my guest has been sent an invite to that as well as many other candidates. It's going to be covered by several different internet broadcasters, myself. I'll be hosting the event, moderating some of the questions, and talking to the roundtable discussion that we've got set up. Dave Kopaz from Red Pill Politics has agreed to sign on and broadcast the show from there, as well as Stephanie Davis from MassachusettsMatters.com. She's going to be there broadcasting her show, and in July we've got a press release going out for to the regular media, Worcester Cable Access, the Telegram and Gazette, Worcester Herald, some of the local radio stations here in Worcester, CRN, ICN, CUW. To see who else wants to show up. And that's the actual media. But I don't expect much to hear from those guys. But so far, everybody else is showing up, and this is going to go viral all across the social network. And as you all know, the way the Meat and Potatoes just virally posts all his interviews and everything across the website. So be looking for that over the next few weeks, actually. Anyway, my guest calling in today, he's running for state representative of the 18th Worcester District, which covers, here in Massachusetts, which covers the people of the Webster area, Douglas area, Sutton, and the north and south areas of the Oxford part of the state. And for the past 3 years, my guest has worked as chief of staff for the state representative, Peter Durant. And before working at the State House, he graduated from Bentley University with a degree in economics and finance. And ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to welcome to the show Joe McKenna. Joe, welcome to the show. Good to have you finally calling in.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Great. It's awesome. It's awesome. Let's talk about you first. Let's start off right there. Let's talk about you, your campaign, what planted the seed, how that all started, and just introduce yourself to my audience, sir.
Sure. I'm a Central Mass kid, so the district, as you mentioned, is Douglas, Sutton, the southern half of Oxford and Webster, which, as everyone knows, is home of Lake Chagagog, Manchagagog, Chivagog. So that's the district, and I was born and raised in Charlton, so right here in Central Mass, and went to school, as you mentioned, at Bentley University and got a degree in economics and finance. And got involved with Peter Durant's campaign about a year and a half after I graduated as a volunteer, and was fortunate enough to get an offer to work in his office, and just fell in love with public service, which I've always been involved in my community as a volunteer and doing various things, but working in public service and working for Peter was I really fell in love with it. And part of what really drew me to it was being able to help people deal with the state government, which is, even for some of us who work there, it's hard to do sometimes. And so to be able to help constituents who call in when they need help with unemployment or disability, things like that, has been really, really rewarding. And also, with my economics background and as a conservative here in Massachusetts, one of the few, I felt that there was often just a complete lack of common sense, or what I perceived as common sense. And what many people I talk to perceive as common sense when looking at the way the government works. And Beacon Hill really has not delivered the government that the people I talk to want or deserve. So it's the typical, if you complain, you might as well stand up and do something. Our current state rep here, Ryan Chapman, has decided to run for state senate, and I found myself in a great position to challenge for that seat and to continue what I think has been some great leadership here in South Central Mass.
Right. Well, yeah, we're working to try to get Ryan Patman onto the show as well. I've been in email contact with him and I know Stephanie also, and I've covered some of Brad Wyatt's campaign. You know, he's up in the Clinton, Sterling area, and Brad and I we work together in the Liberty Movement anyway. So you had talked about just the way the government is not working. It's not news to anybody, that's for sure. But you have a different angle that you want to approach this at. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really just to bring some transparency and to get, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's not starting from scratch, but it's supporting those ideas that will get government working for businesses, working for our local communities, and get people back to work. There are so many policies that have been proposed but utterly ignored that will get people hired at businesses on Main Street throughout not only my district but throughout Mass. And a few of those ideas are just hiring incentives for businesses to hire long-term disabled or unemployed or returning veterans, things like that will directly help people work and get back to work. But for some reason, people chooses to kind of ignore those policies in favor of raising taxes, raising revenues, raising fees to pay for endless programs.
Well, yeah, and I was speaking a couple of weeks ago to a senatorial candidate out in Oregon, Mark Callahan, and one of the things he spoke about was, you've got a lot of federal regulations. They've locked up a lot of land there in Oregon. And a lot of the regulations, and we're going to dovetail out of this into what you had said when you were giving your speech at the State House, but it goes along with the regulations. The regulations are passed to prevent large businesses, large corporations taking advantage of employees, taking advantage of the environment. And what ends up happening is all these regulations, these big corporations, they have ways to buy their way out of them. And anybody who knows anything about business regulations know that a lot of times large corporations are in bed with government to start regulations in order to drive out the competition that can't afford the regulations. So what Mark Callahan was talking about is all these regulations, all that's hurting are all the small businesses. There are entire towns in Oregon, small family logging operations that have been in generations of their families shut down, entire communities that depend on those jobs shut down, all because of these massive regulations. And comment on that, please.
It's a very simple question that will show you kind of how to understand it. Who can better understand a tax code that is thousands of pages long? The multi-billion-dollar corporation who can hire a team of lawyers, hundreds and hundreds of very well-trained lawyers, or the public accountant that does his own finances and tries to follow the tax code on a Sunday afternoon out of his the office above his garage.
Right.
Who can better understand the regulations on zoning and what they can sell and where to open a business, the major corporation or the mom and pop shop that opened on the vacant storefront on Main Street and does not have formal training.
Right. Right, and I think of things like years ago. I was a contractor. I ran my entire business off my kitchen table. I did it. I didn't make a ton of money, but I was able to feed my family and pay my bills and that kind of thing. And I was able to hire a couple of buddies to help me and pay them on the side here and there. But once things started growing and I had to quote unquote go legitimate, I was like, I can't afford this. I can't do this. I've got to apply for this. I ended up going to get my contractor's license. This was back in the 90s. That cost me like $700, then like another $200 to take the test. And I was able to afford that, but then as we went along, it's like an insurance compensation, and you're going to comply with this environmental rule, and you're going to work on this property, you have to file a DEQE permit, and this permit, and that permit. And after a while, it's like, before I even set foot on a job site, I've spent $10,000 for crying out loud, and I've got to factor that into my price to the customer, and when the customer sees that price, they're going to be like, oh, sorry, have a nice day, it was nice meeting you, but I can't afford this. And that's what happens here. So anyway,
and there's so many people that choose not to go into business just because they don't even know where to begin. You start to just look at it, and it's overwhelming, and it's stressful just to think about. So many people choose, I'm just going to go, put put my dreams on the back burner and go work for another company.
Exactly.
Which is too bad.
While we're on the subject of regulations and legislations, you gave a great speech at the State House a little while ago. You know, and it all stems from I think it's the San Bernardino shooting, and just recently there's another shooting in Seattle. Personally, I'm starting to think there's a cabal going on here. I don't think it's just some lone crazed gun. Well, I know it's a lone crazed gunman doing it, but there's the concentration now in the media of focusing on these things, and every time something like that happens, legislators get up on the bully pulpit and start screaming for more gun regulation. And I'm going to quote from the speech that you gave at the State House here. And I told you before off the microphone, it was spot on, folks. I'll put the website up on the video when it's all done, but it's spot on here. Anyway. This legislation sadly misplaces blame for violent crime on citizens who lawfully seek to own firearms. By increasing regulations, record-keeping requirements, local police discretion, and fines for a number of minor infractions, we are creating an environment where those looking to own firearms as a means of self-preservation, recreation, competition, or simply to exercise their right as U.S. citizens are left abused by the laws that profess to keep them safe. Talk to us about that hearing and what went on, and talk to us about this bill that DeLeo was in front of the microphones a little while ago talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was a bill that it professes to be the work of a special committee that Speaker DeLeo put together to research gun violence, and that committee put forward 44 suggestions on reforms that the state needed. Some of them were really not terrible because they dealt with the one common thread that all of these mass shootings have, which is someone who is suffering from any number of behavioral health or mental health issues. And what you see is, and I think you touched on a big part of it with the media, these are people who are often ostracized from society and are left out, and they do this, and the media rewards them in a way by giving them that attention that they seek. And so the major problem is that our mental health programs, our mental health system is leaving them abandoned before they get to this point. So that's where we need to focus on getting these individuals the care that they need is in the mental health programs. That being said, the government, and Massachusetts specifically, has turned to what's the easiest solution when people kick and scream and yell that we need more gun control because someone has chosen to commit an act of violence using a gun. And they've gone after the easiest solution, which is simply to increase those regulations and those fees on those who are going to obey the law. And, I mean, the definition of a criminal is someone who's not going to obey the law. So I find it hard to understand how increasing the laws that are already there are going to in any way decrease violence, because the criminal is going to get the guns no matter what, or those who are suffering from mental issues are going to be able to get the guns no matter what because they don't care what the laws are. So simply changing a coherent definition there doesn't really change that. But what it does is it's a public declaration that, these guns are the reason they were mass shootings. These gun owners are the reasons they were mass shootings, which couldn't be further from the truth. And I painted a little bit of a story at the hearing that wasn't on the written testimony is, my own mother suffered a home break in her home in a very safe neighborhood here in Central Mass, and thank God that she was not home. But she, for the longest time, for a couple of years, had not renewed her LTC just because of that process. And it's just that type of thing where, maybe I'll do it next week. It's a pain in the neck. You don't really have the time to go through the training, the courses, and the fees, so maybe I'll do it next week. And lo and behold, she had a home break. So I just, pray that there's not a situation where someone is seriously hurt or killed because they have not chosen to defend themselves when they otherwise would have, simply because the state has made it too hard.
Yeah, and you use in your speech, as I told you before, I read the whole thing, you use that analogy of the use of a fire extinguisher. Everyone's got a fire extinguisher in their home. Yep. You would never create regulation to forbid people from owning a fire extinguisher, and the only time a person would need a fire extinguisher is in an extreme emergency. Yet, why do we do the same thing? I mean, this is a constitutional right. That, you know,
Yeah.
even in your speech, you say, you know, it's kind of ironic that we, you know, that we have to jump through all these hoops and barriers just to exercise a documented right. It's great.
Yeah. And the right to bear arms is the only one that specifies these rights shall not be infringed upon.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are debating yet again further gun restriction.
Exactly. And I wonder if these people are doing it purposely because there's a certain constituency out there that will support them on that, and they're looking for their votes, or if this is part of a larger UN cabal to disarm the entire planet. God knows that'll never ever happen. I really don't know where this knee-jerk mindset evolves from. I'm trying to investigate it, trying to uncover it, and the further deeper I go, the messier it even looks. So I really don't know.
If you can find the source of it and let me know, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
I've been traveling around the district here, and I've had every single day someone asks me, where do you stand on the Second Amendment? Will you support us? And I have yet to meet one person who has asked me to further regulate and restrict their access to guns.
Right.
So it's a almost unanimous position in this district as far as what I'm finding.
Sure.
So I don't know necessarily where that the whole impetus is coming from to go after the guns, except for the news reports and the immediate backlash from that.
Let's switch gears here. Let's get right into the outline here. I and several of the Tea Party members here in Worcester, Mass. were at a Department of Motor Vehicles hearing a few weeks back, and that video was also on the Meat and Potatoes YouTube page. It was held at Union Station in a very backroom, obscure office. Very little publicity. I would never have known about it if I didn't have my contacts to the Tea Party and some of the other internet media outlets that I'm associated with. But the legislators have basically told the DMV that they can no longer afford their operations by borrowing out of the general fund. In other words, they've got to fund their own operations and pay for them up front. Well, instead of cutting budgets, laying off workers, cutting salaries, or maybe even closing a few more facilities at the DMV, I know, longer lines, they're embarking on these upgrades to the computer system. They're hiring more people to pay for all of this, and all the DMVs are about to climb exponentially. Some numbers are range. I've looked at some of the numbers. You're looking at a 75% increase in the fees, from driver's license to renewals to registration, title, tax, all that BS that you have to go through at the DMV. But what makes this a complete travesty is that they agreed to pass this already in 2013. And the hikes go into effect on July 1st. But they held the public meetings, public hearings, like only a few weeks ago. And it's like, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, wait a minute, guys. Aren't you supposed to do the public hearings first and then hear what the public has to say and then decide to do this? I mean, this is just, who's running this government here, Joe?
That actually sounds like another situation that I was going to touch on a little earlier, and I'll do that very briefly, but the tech tax that was passed.
Yeah.
And they passed this industry-specific tax on technology industries, and lo and behold, the tech industry was outraged, threw tantrum, rightfully so, and was successfully able to get that repealed. And their excuse was, oh, well, we didn't hear from anyone in the tech industry before filing this tax. Well, you never asked anyone, did you?
Yeah.
So they're doing the same thing with these fees, and they're holding these hearings it sounds like to let us know what they've decided, you know?
That's exactly what they did. Well, they even said, it's on the film the footage that I shot at the meeting. You know, Dan Levinson was his name. He's the CFO of the DMV. And what he basically, you know, when we asked him, it's like, you know, why are you holding these hearings now? He's like, and he quite literally gave us the canned response, because we're required under law to hold public meetings. It's like, yes, we understand that, Dan. Why are you holding them now? He wouldn't answer the question. He wouldn't answer it. It was unbelievable. This is what I'm saying to you about who's running this government. Who's running this show?
Yeah, it's certainly not the people who
Exactly.
it should be a government of the people for the people, and That's not what we're getting right now.
And as these fees begin to trickle down through the economy, this ties into another thing that I've been working on. I've been part of the petition drive to repeal the automatic gas tax. And just hear me out here, and then I want your comments on this. As these fees begin to trickle through the economy, they will most likely have an effect on prices across the state. It's just simple economics 101. If the automatic gas tax is still upheld, we will see a rise in gasoline prices. And if the legislators agree to a minimum wage of $10.10 an hour, we will see prices rise again. And this will all have a sharp increase of inflation all across the board. If the 10.10 thing goes through, if these DMV hikes go through, you just mentioned the tech tax, if these automatic taxes that they're talking about, if all this goes through, you're going to end up with what I call what is called runaway inflation. And we all know that the gas tax is tied to inflation. So as the inflation goes up, the taxes go up. You're going to end up having runaway inflation. In fact, the very people that the Democrats claim to be on the side of are going to be the hardest hit. We're talking about the working poor, or even those who are poor on subsidies and welfare. It's going to hit them the hardest. And I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, and the first thing you learn in Economics 101 is the relationship between supply and demand. And it's a very clear relationship. As supply goes up, demand goes inverse. And part of supply is made up of the cost.
Right.
So the costs relate directly to what you and I pay out of our pocket. And so it only makes sense that if we drive up the cost of delivering goods through gasoline, of employees getting to work, of their salaries, we drive up the cost of everyday living, naturally we're going to have to pay more for those exact same things. And they tend to kind of leave off that back part of that equation when telling everyone, oh, with the new minimum wage, you're going to be making so much more. Well, yeah, but the dollar menu is no longer going to exist on McDonald's because they can't afford to put it out. So,
yeah. And not only that
trade-off.
And here's one of the things, because, again, getting back to that saying we call Economics 101, I mean, you have $10.10 an hour. Now that puts the working poor into a different tax bracket. So not only are they going to end up paying more in gasoline taxes because all the prices have to rise and it's tied to inflation, more of your state income tax will be coming out of your paycheck every week. So you sit there and you say to yourself, oh, I'm earning $10.10 an hour now. Isn't that great? They raised the minimum wage. Oh, wait a minute. You forgot. You're paying more for gasoline taxes. Oh, and a 75% increase in registering your car. You're also paying more out of your paycheck every week because now you're in a different tax bracket and the state is taking a larger bite. So you might think on the surface you're getting $10.10 an hour, but you're not. Again, this is hurting the people that the Democrats claim to be helping the most. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen here. And you mark my words, folks. Maybe not you, Joe, but since you're going to be running and most likely get in Beacon Hill, please remember this. Let me tell you what's going to happen here. You'll see more poor Massachusetts residents driving around on expired stickers, expired insurance, expired plates, expired driver's license. Not because they're lazy or they're criminals, but because they will have to choose between a $50 inspection sticker or food for the week. This is what I'm talking about. And you know, with automobiles, it's not like it used to be when you and I were kids. If a car breaks down, you and your dad spent the Sunday afternoon fixing it. It's not like that anymore. We just went and had a starter motor put into one of our cars. It cost us $500. I was like, $500? I used to do starter motors in my sleep when I was a kid. But this is what I'm talking about, the fees, the cost, the inflation, the more. It's going to force the poor people to just have to break the law just in order to get to work every day. And then what you're going to see here is you're going to see, because you know what's going to happen, police will start pulling you over, pulling people over. You're going to see this influx of, how many cars did you get today? Oh, we towed 475 cars today. 475 cars. Well, yeah, all these people are driving around on illegal licenses, illegal stickers, not because they're criminals. They can't afford it, Joe.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail right on the head. And actually, I'm certainly not doing this for the money. And I had the same situation recently where I had to make the decision of, do I get my car inspected this week, or do I have to try and wait a couple weeks until my paycheck comes in? Because I just couldn't you're exactly right with that.
That's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I pray that it doesn't, but I'll be honest with you, and I'm always honest with my audience. You know, there have been tough times in my life, very tough times, and I've done that. It's like, I can't afford my registration. I can't do it. I can't do it. But I have to get to work. I got to go to work because I got to pay my rent, or I've got the electric bill, or my kid got sick, or something's going on. And I do. I get in my car and I drive illegally to work, praying to God that nothing happens. A few times it did, you know. But that's the other thing. When it does happen, now you've got $200 towing fee, $100 a day storage of the car. And they always seem to get you on a Friday so that your car sits there for 2 or 3 days. Then you got to go to court and pay a $200 court fee. Then you're on probation for a year at $50 a month or $100 a month. Again, this is going to hit the people who can least afford it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's just, they nickel and dime you every time you get, every chance you get, with the little fees, and it's too bad.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making it too cost prohibitive to get to work to make a living.
It is, especially with state. I can only imagine what it must be like in California, because I know California is like even more astronomical. It's insane. But let's move on here. But speaking about automobiles, Democratic candidate for governor Martha Coakley is under fire again for the use of state vehicles on her campaign. And on more than a few occasions, she's been caught red-handed with her staff and drivers parking in tow zones and blocking off streets where she appears for events. I mean, it must be nice to use taxpayer money to gain an advantage in an election, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, there's two different schools of thought. One that says you don't use it at all, and the other that says, okay, if you use the car, you use the driver, that's one thing, but you better record it and pay for it and at least make the state whole at the end of the day. And Martha Coakley just ignored both standards of thought and said, I'm going to use the car and hopefully no one will realize or find out about it, and I'm going to go on. And she keep in mind, is the chief law enforcement officer of the state, you know?
Ironic, isn't it?
No, I'm not going to really follow this one.
Yeah, supposedly she did something like this 4 years ago. She still hasn't reimbursed the state.
Yeah, that's just it. It's not a couple weeks. It's not a one-time trip that slipped through the cracks. It's years and years of reported just arrogance to the system that says, I'm the Attorney General, I can do what I want, which is really pretty sad.
You know what's sad, too, is the dull-witted, you know, this one-party state that we live in, the dull-witted Democrats, she'll win. She'll be our governor. You know, I mean, God forbid, I'm praying to God that doesn't happen, but it wouldn't be surprising me. And it wouldn't surprise me that if she loses the election, she loses by a narrow margin. That's just how insane the state is. It's really nuts. You know, we talk about these outrages. And the press kind of reports on it. Yet nothing is ever done about it. Now let's look at Martha Coakley. She's already did this before, 4 years ago. She still hasn't paid the state back. Let's look at Elizabeth Warren hiring her daughter or her daughter-in-law or somebody like that to get Deval Patrick to give her a grant or some money to go and register welfare voters. That turned into a scandal. We've got Obama with multiple scandals. The press is reporting on it, but the thing I've noticed in the press is it's like they're just giving us just the facts, man. Just the facts, man. That's all they're giving us. And it's like there's how old are you, Joe?
26.
All right, so you don't remember. I'm 50. I remember the Nixon Watergate hearings. The guy, it consumed an entire year of media. It is a historical event. It's unbelievable. All over 18 minutes of missing tape. It was unbelievable. And Coakley, Warren, Obama, Holder, Valerie Jarrett, every single one of them. The scandals are, you can smell them from here in my basement. You can smell them. Nothing is being done.
It's getting to be to the point where it sounds more like a sitcom because every week there's some new, just absolutely unfathomable breach of the trust of the people. And when you think once, bad enough, now we're handing over a traitor to release 5 top-level Taliban activists. It's like, where did we get to that point? And it's just, you don't see the outrage. If it had been a Republican president, there would have been people screaming at the gate, and yet here we are just reporting on it. Like you said, just giving us the facts, but no commentary, no added extras to it. And it's the world we live in, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know how we change that.
You know, and I'm thinking also, as you know about the situation going on with Mark Fisher, which seems to have quieted down now. He seems to have gotten his name on the ballot as it is. But I'm wondering if that dispute between Mark Fisher and the Mass GOP was purposeful, maybe not necessarily by Fisher himself, but maybe the GOP took advantage of it, maybe the media took advantage of it to create a distraction of some kind. And do you think that distraction and that dispute could benefit the Democratic frontrunners?
Yeah, because I think it just shows the story that the Massachusetts Republican Party can't get out of its own way,
right.
Doesn't know how to manage, doesn't know how to operate. Professors could be the clean, transparent, responsible party, and yet has this alleged collusion behind the scenes and all that. So it just, some of it may be true, some of it may not. I don't know the details,
right.
But it really took away from either Mark Fisher or Charlie Baker talking about how Martha Coakley is abusing the taxpayers and how the state is going after guns illegally. It takes away from the core message that the voters really care about and want to hear about, and that will win the governorship for a conservative candidate, and instead focuses on, well, he said, she said, and we're infighting again. So I was really disappointed about that whole thing.
Yeah.
I think that the party should have allowed Mark Fisher on the ballot from the get-go,
sure.
just to avoid the whole controversy of it all.
Right. It would have made for a much more, I think, and I understand you got to narrow it down to one front runner on one side and one front runner on the other side. But we're not at that point yet. We haven't had the September primaries yet, as far as that's concerned. But I think it would make for a much better race to have two voices, because that's it. That's all we got. We just got Fisher and we've got Baker, and we've got Joe McCormick from the Libertarian side, who I'm trying to get on the show also. So you've only got these three. On the Democrat side, you've got something like half a dozen, and they represent all wings of the Democratic Party. I think there's a woman there that I think she's actually part of the Socialist Democrat Party.
Yeah, Julia Tam is way far left, way out there. And then Joe Avalone is there as well, and then of course Steve Grossman and Martha Coakley.
Right. But these people are getting the coverage. Charlie Baker's getting the coverage. Fisher's getting some coverage, but when they focus on Fisher or Baker, they invariably talk about what you just said about how the GOP is falling apart. We can't figure out what we're doing, and so that message is being sent to the public that, oh, the Republicans are all screwed up. What are they doing? Which is a complete lie, because I work with the Worcester RTC. I'm good friends with Bonnie Johnson down there, and I'm going to be working as a poll worker later on this fall at a polling station. And I went to the Election Commission meeting. I wrote a story for it for the Worcester Herald and stuff. So I'm covering all this stuff. It's complete hogwash. I mean, the RTC. All the different towns, they've got their acts together. They know what they're doing. And even though Bonnie is a big Charlie Baker guy and I'm a Mark Fisher guy, I don't spend our meeting time arguing with her about it. I mean, we talk about the message. Well, one of the big things we're concentrating on here in Worcester is they're changing a few of the polling stations in and around the city, and we're trying to get more poll workers on the Republican side. Because of the 2012 shenanigans, which brings me to my next question, voter fraud. I mean, what is your take on that? What are your worries about that? And why don't you speak to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I am personally all for IDs at the ballot box.
Yeah.
We need IDs to purchase an R-rated, to go to an R-rated movie. You need an ID to get a drink. You need an ID to buy a pack of cigarettes. But the right to vote, which is essentially what the whole country was founded on, which is the reason we, seceded from Britain, was because no taxation without representation. So to vote and have a voice in our government, the most sacred right of a citizen, we're going to just, say, oh, we trust you. We're not going to verify that. You know, we're a land of immigrants, but we're not going to verify that you are a citizen deserving of your right to vote. So I am all for the IDs to vote, and I think that generally it's not the big limiting factor that you would hear. And it's funny, I sat in on polls myself, and if you're an inactive voter, so you're registered but you haven't voted in a number of years, you do actually have to show your ID.
Sure.
So they'll ask one person in line to show their ID. And I've done this in minority districts, and you'll see every person in line will reflexively start pulling out their ID because they see someone in front of them show it. No one complains. No one gets upset. They just say, oh, we're showing our ID today.
Right.
It's not a big controversial issue that the liberals will make it out to be. And, you know, I think it is necessary to preserve the vote.
Yeah, of course we can. I do. Even though we technically don't have the law, every time I go to vote, I always show my ID anyway. Just and because of what you just said, that if I show it, and I've seen it, I've seen other people in line saying, "Oh, you have to show ID," and it's like, "No, you don't." But I'm just showing my ID. Oh, okay, and they do. It's like a reflex operation. That's what they do. They do. They want to make sure that their vote counts, for crying out loud. Anyway, let's switch gears here again. We all know about the problems with the Department of Children and Families here. Olga Roche has obviously resigned. That's not bringing back Jeremiah Oliver. It's not bringing back the poor child that was killed in Grafton, Massachusetts under DCF care. It's certainly not going to help Justina Pelletier, and we're going to get to her in a second, or the 130-plus children missing from DCF. When are there going to be some criminal indictments, and when is there going to be an overhaul of this organization?
You know, unfortunately, I would be surprised if there was any true accountability held over Olga Roche. And they just announced, I don't know if it was today or very recently, they've announced that DCF has hired 200 additional caseworkers since they fast-tracked the money to that agency after that whole incident. So
more money. You do know, I want to interrupt you for a second, I'm sorry about that, but you do know that for every child that they abduct from a family, and I use that word with no problem, they abduct and kidnap children from families, $4,000 per child from the federal government. You know that, it's signed by Clinton. I've been doing a huge expose on DCF and CPS, and I'm in contact with several people across the nation. This is a fact. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So I think that the immediate influx of additional workers to DCF is fine and dandy to try and stem the tide of bad news. But what you get is there's no systematic change. There's no underlying change in the way that the agency is run. And so once they kind of acclimate again to the new workloads and the new caseloads and all that, you're going to be in the same system where the same standards or lack of standards as far as which cases to investigate and which cases to aggressively pursue abduction, as you point out, are going to be in place. So the actual system is not going to change.
Right.
What we really need is to just kind of tear it all down and start from scratch again in actually defending children from abusive situations, which is the mission, not in going after specific targets or cases like Justina Pelletier, where there may or may not have been abuse. So, we're going to abduct her for a year just to get takes.
Sure.
And, that's really an abuse of what the agency is there for.
And Governor Deval Patrick, he could have stepped up. Obama signs executive order like we use toilet paper, for crying out loud. Governor Deval Patrick could have stepped up, said no more. I don't care what the judge says. I don't care what anybody says. I'm the governor. Here's an executive order. Release her immediately. Return her to her family. Stay out of her life. He could have done the right thing. What a governor, a leader, a person who claims to represent the people, he could have done that. But instead, we all know what he did. He just passed her off to Connecticut's DCF. It's like, good move, good involved. Again, Joe, who's running the show over there? It's unbelievable. You there?
I'm losing you a little bit, so I might have missed the last part of
Well,
that.
what I'm saying is, the governor could have done the right thing by just signing an executive order and just letting her go back to the family. But instead, he just passed her off to Connecticut's version of DCF. And I mean, that's, and Obama, he signs executive laws like we use toilet paper, and that was the whole gist.
Be careful saying that. You may give him an idea.
No, really. I know. Yeah, really. So, Joe, what's planned for you over the next few weeks for your campaign? Where are you heading, and tell us what's going on in the future here for you.
Well, I'm heading up to, as I mentioned, the 200 Club here in Webster, which is a sportsman's club.
Yeah, talk about that. You wanted to talk about that.
What was that?
You wanted to talk about that. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, not a problem. I'm heading up there to talk again back to the beginning of our conversation about the gun bill. I mean, that's just such an issue that is so important to the voters that, really would like to talk about that with the voters. And my whole campaign is based on getting out and talking to the voters, introducing myself, and giving them an opportunity to ask me the questions personally, one-on-one. So I've given out my cell phone everywhere I go, and I'll be more than happy to share my cell phone with you on the air.
Yeah, go ahead.
And ask everyone to give me a call if you have any questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So my cell phone is 774-230-5080. So if you have any questions, you want to talk to me, find out where I stand on an issue, give me a call. Even if we don't agree, I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Sure.
So, my summer is going to be a whole lot of door knocking. I hope to get to over 10,000 doors and just meet the voters where they are and get a chance to introduce myself and talk to them.
Good for you. Good. And you got Peter Durant on your side anyway. So what's he doing now? He's still at Beacon Hill, isn't he?
Yep, he is. He's the state rep in the 6th Worcester, so he's got Charlton, Dudley, Southbridge, and Park Spencer, and he's running for re-election again every 2 years. So,
good.
Wish him the very best.
Good. And Joe, please, I've sent you an invite. Please mark August 30th. I'd love to have you on the panel. As I said earlier when we first started this show here today, there's going to be media event there, and there's going to be a lot of people covering it. You're going to talk to a lot of constituents in the Worcester, Charlton, Dudley, all over. I'm getting a lot of hits, and it's going to end up being standing room only. So please try to get there for August 30th. We'd love to have you there.
Yeah, I've got a placeholder right now in the calendar, so
great.
Any major incidents, I do plan on being there.
Excellent, Joe. Thank you so much for doing that. That's great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Joe McKenna. He's running in the 18th Worcester District, serving the Douglas, Webster, Sutton, Oxford areas of Massachusetts. Joe, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to give a plug to my website again. Just make sure you get out to electjoemckenna.com. You can reach out to me there as well and learn more about my campaign and how you can help out.
And all of that will be posted up on the interview on the page. Everything's going to go on the Facebook page and across as I usually do it. So, Joe, I wish you the best of luck, and I'll most likely see if I can book you again sometime in the beginning of August so we can talk again, and then I look forward to seeing you on the 30th. Joe, thanks a lot, man. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Excellent.